Hello, my name is John Thornhill. I'm the innovation editor and a tech columnist at the Financial Times. It's great to be at this conference, and in particular to have the opportunity to interview Jeroen van der Vlugt, who is the Chief Information Officer of the Dutch Ministry of Defense. Now, I'd like to start by asking you about your background. As I understand it, you're the first CIO of the Dutch Ministry of Defense who has come from the private sector and has a non-traditional, not a military background. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, that's a long story, to be honest.
We'll have the short version.
But I will take the shortcut. Well, I like to make a joke that I'm already 25 years a data scientist, studying econometrics a long time ago, and then starting for Dutch Telecom. I worked there several years, and then went to Atos, a IT company, where I also spent most of my time in the IT infrastructure, and then switched to a consulting firm and working on the field of business IT alignment. And from that point, I decided to move on and to join the Ministry of Defense. So.
Okay, and does the appointment of a non-military officer to this post signal a change of thinking in the Dutch Defense Ministry?
Well, I don't know if it's the difference in thinking. We work with military and we work with civilians, of course, within our Ministry of Defense. That's quite common, so it's not something that's new. And I think it's only good that people from the industry also work for government, whether it's just the military or it's another subject of the government, that doesn't matter. But I think that there should be much more exchange between government and industry. I think that will be good for both.
Right, that's a theme I'd love to come back to and explore in a bit. But could you tell us, first of all, what you're responsible for? We talk about the kind of 5 domains in military. Are you responsible for all of them, and how does AI affect all of those domains?
Yes, I'm working for the headquarters, MOD, in the Netherlands. So I'm responsible for all the 5 domains, not responsible, of course, in command and control terms, but responsible for data science, cybersecurity, and IT within the MOD. And as we're doing that from the headquarters, the responsibility goes with all the 5 commands we have.
Okay. And in what ways is the Dutch Defense Ministry using AI at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. Because what we see is that AI is only technology. Unless you like coding or you like mathematics, then AI on itself may be very interesting. But it's of course with the application, which is very interesting. So where can you do AI in the Ministry of Defense? So one of the things we see is that we do that where big data come into place. We of course a lot of sensor data, but also open source information, open source data. And the amounts of data are so huge that a man can't oversee it, the total. So you need artificial intelligence, for instance, to see anomalies or to see patterns in the data, which you can't see as a human. Compare that with, for instance, looking at an MRI scan as a medical doctor. AI can be of great help to see patterns you can't see as a human because they are too small or they are too much information, etc. So big data analytics and AI is a combination we see using it, for instance, in intelligence is very important, but we use it also in cybersecurity, for instance.
Mm-hmm. You're saying that it's just a technology, but I was in an earlier session where I think a useful distinction was made about the fact that AI is different from many other technologies in that it's not just a tool, it can in some circumstances also be an agent. It is in some circumstances replacing human decision-making. Is that a useful way of thinking of it? Is it a distinction you're making?
I don't know. I like to play it down a little bit because what you see with a lot of technology, a lot of new technology, that is really hyped. And when you look at the hype cycle, I think we're currently at the top at this moment from AI perspective, at least. And what you see is that it has to do with where are you going to use it, whether it's become an agent or not an agent. And that decision is to humans, where to use it. So I think it's very important to see where are we going to use that AI. For instance, when you use it in supply chain or in operations research, that's a totally different when you use it, for instance, in military decision making. So it's really depending on where to adopt AI. And the same situation, and I make the parallel again with the doctor, maybe the algorithm is outperforming the image recognition of an MRI scan. But at the end, the doctor and the patient will together decide whether to do surgery or not. It's the same with us. Maybe the algorithm is outperforming the humans in image recognition, so it can be better or more effective or more efficient. But in the end, the commander has to decide whether and how to use it. So there is always a human-machine interaction over there.
But I mean, talking to people in the kind of medical profession who are using some of these expert systems and recommendation systems now, there is, and we all suffer from it, an automation bias. We tend to think that the computer is right. Well, in both healthcare and in the military, that has incredibly important consequences if you get it wrong. So how can we reinforce the human agent in this case to believe that they have to trust their judgment and not just defer to an automated system?
Yeah, but of course the bias can also be with the human itself, isn't it? I mean, the doctor can also be wrong, the algorithm can also be wrong. And I think we have to look very closely in the development of AI algorithms in every stage, from design to deployment, how the algorithm is performing and if it's performing right. And we should also address who is responsible for that cycle, for that phase in that cycle. For instance, when it's in the operation or in the deployment, well, the commander will be in charge of the algorithm. But on the design phase, it will be somebody else. So in every phase, you have to derive who is responsible for that specific step.
Okay. What do you think we've learned from the Ukraine war about the application of AI?
Yeah, well, of course, that's a difficult question because we don't see all the things that are happening in the Ukraine at this moment. But at least what we see is that we make heavily use of commercial and military satellite images, for instance, and AI is being used to recognize where the adversary is at that moment. So, well, that's a relatively simple example, of course, and you can read it also in the newspaper, of course, also in the Financial Times, where you see those nice pictures and you see it's depicted where the adversary is at that moment. So I think, so image recognition is one of the things where AI is used to see where the Russian Federation is at that moment, and which kind of material, vehicles, etc., how many people, etc.
You're talking there about the kind of reliance on kind of private sector companies, and I guess historically militaries have, for very good reasons, tended to be very closed organizations. But in this new world that we're moving into, they have to partner with private sector companies. They also have to kind of draw in, as you're saying, kind of open source intelligence, satellite imagery, or kind of civilian reports about what's going on. How does that affect the way that you're working? You obviously speak the language of the private sector, given your background, but how can you draw in the private sector to help you do what you do without ceding too much control to the private sector?
Yeah, well, it takes two to tango, in the first place. And I think that the military, but also the government as a whole, well, needs to open up to the industry. But it's vice versa. So it's also the other way around. And what we are trying to do is to make ecosystems, for instance, together with industry, about radar technology, also about AI in the Netherlands, to investigate how we can work closer together and also to have understanding of each other. Because when you work for government, then the political decision making is very important. For instance, relating to privacy issues, which is a huge subject in the Netherlands. On the other hand, from the government perspective, there is also a thing called, for instance, commercial pressure. And you should also be aware of that. And so there is no such thing as a free lunch. So we have to bear in mind what our positions are and work closely together. And I think we can really improve in that. And I'm seeing we're making steps, but also the exchange of people from government to the public sector and vice versa. Well, I think it's very important because then you understand each other better.
I was talking here yesterday with Alex Karp, the chief executive of Palantir, who was urging Europe to get serious about tech. That most of the companies that defense ministers interact with tend to be kind of West Coast US organizations. If Europe is talking about asserting its own technological sovereignty, it needs to have its own kind of cloud computing companies, AI companies that are truly kind of cutting edge. Is that right, do you think?
I think certainly we are lagging behind by the US at this moment, certainly regarding big tech.
And what do we do about that?
Yeah, of course, there are some European initiatives to see whether we can establish, for instance, sovereign cloud or a highly secure cloud, for instance. But there are also other ways to work around. You can also work on your own crypto, for instance, to ensure that your data are safe. To see it the other way around, talking about the Ukraine, we know that the Ukraine transferred a lot of their services, public services, to the cloud, for instance, to be less viable for the Russian Federation. So there's also another side on this, and I think that Europe should invest heavily in big tech and become serious about it. Totally agree with that. But on the other hand, we should also not be too cautious about that. And keeping the risks good in mind, but also see if there are ways of working around. And we see at least in the Netherlands, but I see also other European countries working together on that.
Now, the theme of this conference is clearly responsible AI, and you've sketched out a lot of the opportunities that there are in that area. Could you just take us through your thinking on what is responsible AI? What are the yardsticks that you use to measure?
Yes, well, I come back again to that cycle of the development of AI, from idea design to the deployment of AI. And in every phase, you have to be sure that it's up to the legislation, to privacy legislation, but also to your ethical compass, for instance, but also about the biases and the data you use, etc. So in every step, there should be that responsibility question on several subjects. And you have to make sure that in every step, the right questions are answered. Are the things we are doing, is this ethical? Is this legally correct? But is it also political necessary to do that? And so you have to make steps in every cycle and also build some iteration in between that. So an algorithm, certainly an AI algorithm, isn't ready when it's deployed. You can say, well, then it's starting, because then it's learning and getting better and better and better. So you have to be very close in that iteration. I think that's important, and that means responsibility for me. And we should not only as military look at it, but also have a conversation about it in the society, like we have now. I think that's very, very important. So also opening up to society to discuss what we are doing, because there is a lot of mystics about AI, what it is and what it not is. And sometimes people think that the A is not from artificial, but it's from autonomous. Well, it's completely different things.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're talking there about the kind of introducing responsible AI, or the centrality of that. Is that best done at a kind of national level, you think, within the Netherlands, or is it done within NATO, or is it worth doing within the United Nations?
I think we're doing that at different levels. We certainly have the discussions within the EU, with the Cloud Act and with the AI Act, etc. And we are fully committed to that and to that discussion, and to bring that further to Dutch legislation in our case. We're also having that discussion within NATO how to use it, and what are the frameworks we can use over there. So it's also on the NATO level. And of course, also with United Nations and non-governmental organizations, we should have that discussion about AI. And because looking at the opening ceremony yesterday and the discussion over there, well, I think it was a really good discussion about it with the Secretary General of Amnesty. About AI doesn't make the war cleaner. The war is never clean. And I thought that was really spot on.
Sure. And I think that raises the issue of, although Western democracies might like to think that they're developing AI in a responsible way, there are going to be actors who are going to use it in an irresponsible way. Yeah. Do you think that the democracies are disarming, as it were, if they do not develop a lot of these weapon systems that can be used if your enemies are doing so?
Yeah, so there should be some parity with your adversaries, of course, but there's a very important thing to develop it our own, is that we also have to gain knowledge about it. So we have to know what the possibilities are with AI in the military environment, because if we don't learn, then we cannot defend ourselves. So for instance, image recognition. We used to work with camouflage, of course, but there is also a possibility of digital camouflage. So you can do certain things with your vehicle, for instance, so it's not recognized by an AI algorithm from your adversary. So therefore, you also have to get into that field. If you don't do that, well, also on the defensive side, you will be a lame duck.
Do you think it is possible to get meaningful international agreements in this area?
Yes, I think certainly there will be, because also broader in the society there will be use of AI. Now we're talking about the medical side, but also operations research, logistics, predictive maintenance, etc. There will be lots of AI, and so it will also come into the military. That's no question. It will be there, and ignoring it or saying it's not allowed will not be working, because it will be there, and there will be in certain things we buy, military stuff we buy. There will be come into some AI. That's unavoidable.
There are also dangers, though, I think, of developing technologies at the frontiers in order to assess their capabilities, aren't there? I mean, I was listening yesterday to Professor Stuart Russell, who was talking about how the NSA in America had developed malware. Yeah. The NotPetya system, which was then basically stolen and leaked. It was picked up by the GRU in Russia and then used against a lot of Western companies and actually Russian companies by mistake. How do we deal with that kind of world? You can't think of any two organizations that have more of an interest in maintaining a separation of information than the NSA in America and the GRU in Russia, and yet that information leaked. Yeah. So how can we understand where this technology is going without releasing it into the wild?
Yeah, there is some balance between openness and transparency, and security and privacy on the other side. So there should be some balance between it. I think and I believe that it's very important to protect your algorithms, for instance. When you know how an algorithm of your adversary works, then you probably also know how his courses of actions are looking like. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that it's also possible to have a bias, or to build a bias in your data, for instance. So when you're looking at an AI algorithm as an engine and the data as your fuel, then you can also put some stuff in the fuel that the algorithm is not working properly anymore. So, and that's quite dangerous, of course, and we have to be aware of that this could happen. And that's also the reason why we have to develop our own knowledge and technology about this, because that's the only way we can protect ourselves and learn from it, and therefore protect ourselves.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, I want to open this up to the questions to the floor very soon, so please think of questions you want to ask. final question before that. You're talking there about the kind of importance of explainability, understanding what these algorithms are doing and being able to explain that to the relevant actors. How do you ensure that? How can you make black box systems explainable to the relevant people?
Yeah, to look at every step in the cycle, how the algorithm is working, what kind of code you're using. It's often not only programmed for the occasion, but also coded from open source, for instance. So be transparent what kind of technology you're using, what kind of code you're using. How does the algorithm look like? Which kind of algorithms do you use? There are millions out of there. I think that a lot of people don't program the algorithm themselves, but get it from the internet and use it. So what kind of building blocks did you use, for instance? And also involve all kinds of aspects, ethical aspects, legal aspects in the development to show what you are doing. And I think that's a great way to look at it. For instance, in the Netherlands, we're going to have an algorithm register where we have to put in our algorithms, certain, not all the algorithms, of course, not from the traffic lights, but algorithms which are impacting society. And we are experimenting within the Ministry of Defense with an algorithm board, for instance, and not only people from the military, but also people from outside to have a look at our things we are doing. And just to be transparent, but of course in a balance of transparency on one side and privacy and security on the other side.
Yes, you probably don't want to put all your algorithms in there.
No, certainly, no.
Right, and questions from the floor? Yes, the lady down here. Oh. Just in front there. Yep.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, because you were saying there is definitely sort of a need for regulations or at least like agreements on an international level in relation to algorithms. Do you also think that it's realistic that there will be agreed upon like international restrictions for algorithms in military use? Because it seems like there might be a little more resistance against that.
Well, I think we certainly will have a discussion about that. And I sometimes also don't really understand the discussion about, for instance, certification of algorithms. I think that could be a very good step to do. When we design and build a car, there are all kinds of legislations that a maker of such a car has to deal with and has to obey to. And that can be from an international perspective, but also national perspective, for instance. So I think there is a great deal in to look at how can you certify algorithms, for instance, that they are safe, that they are doing the things they are supposed to do, what kind of building blocks they are built up from. So I think we should definitely explore that. And well, openness, as well, you don't want to make your adversaries better than you. So, well, you have to be restricted in some kind of areas. But also, that's the same with regular weapon systems.
Okay.
Jeroen from the University of Houston in USA. So what is the role of assessment in responsible AI or accountable AI? You used the word certify algorithms earlier.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I think that's a thing that's open for discussion. But I think certification can be to international laws, for instance, human rights laws. It can be certification about with the use of technology. What kind of technology do you use, and is that technology is that safe, for instance? It could be on the level of security. And we're currently in the process of just finding out, together with our partners in the Netherlands, for instance, from the Dutch AI Coalition, where people from universities and business and government work together on that kind of things. And we have also what we call an ethical, legal, societal impact laboratory, where we have that kind of discussions. So I doesn't have a clear-cut answer, but we're working on that, and I think that's the first main step.
Okay, there's a question at the back. Yep.
Interesting talk. I was wondering, you mentioned something really quickly about responsible versus irresponsible violence or war. And through technology, I've learned that there is a rationalization of violence because we have drones and they just kill somebody that we want them to kill. And how do you think, or what do you think the role of AI will be? The more we use AI and the more we kind of outsource our decisions, even though there will be a human making the final decision, what do you think the role of AI will be in the rationalization of violence?
I don't think that we will outsource our military decisions, at least not on a strategic or tactical level. Of course, in certain situations, but it's with or without AI, there is also always a kind of autonomy in a weapon system. When you are targeting a target and launching a rocket or doing an air defense, something like that, there is always some kind of autonomy in there, but because it's needed to fly, for instance, and to target the aim you're going for. But I don't think on a tactical or strategic level that a machine will take over the decision making. There will always be a commander in the loop. So I'm sometimes I think that also the possibilities of AI at this moment are, I call it the hype cycle, but of course the possibilities are enormous. But I think they're a little bit overrated because what you see, for instance, with generative AI, ChatGPT, how much computing power is needed for a relatively simple task. We don't have that computing power at this moment. We don't have the algorithms at this moment to do that in a very complex environment. Tesla is working years and years with hundreds of millions of dollars to get an autonomous car. But an autonomous car on the highway is working, but an autonomous car in the city center of The Hague, well, it will stand still because, you know, there are bicycles everywhere and pedestrians everywhere, which are doing all kinds of things we didn't account for previously. So I think that is, we really have to be, we really have to be play it a little bit down what the possibilities are. And regarding to decision making, yes, it will be possible to make better decisions, but in a human-machine interface.
Just like to explore that a little more, because I mean, people always say, and it sounds absolutely right, that we need to keep humans in the loop of decision making. But I've talked to military officials who question how practical that is in the fog of war when you have to make decisions at lightning speed. We already have anti-aircraft batteries that are effectively making these decisions for us automatically.
That's correct.
We're moving into a world of hypersonic missiles where the time is compressed all the more. Is it realistic to believe that humans are always going to remain in the loop?
That's the difference between operational, tactical, strategic. On an operational level, after the targeting is done, there will be no human in the loop. So but it's nowadays also the fact. And I think that 20-25 years ago, it was also already there. Only we didn't call that AI, but it isn't AI. That's what I'm trying to say. AI has something to do with an algorithm which is getting better and better, which is learning and which can generate information or generate things on its own. That's with the most regular algorithms we use. It's not the case. Yeah. So I think that's the difference.
Okay, we had a question here. Last question.
Thank you. Edwin de Leeuw, SRI Nederland. You spoke about having a registry for algorithms and also a regulatory board. But these two sound post-fact. What can we do as industry to further cooperation by ensuring that legislation and ethics are implemented from the design phase and from the development phase when we're building algorithms for you?
Yeah. Well, we have discussions with industry at this moment, with partners, that they use our framework, which we have made for algorithms, to use upfront with the development of their own solutions, that they upfront already are up to our framework. So that's the thing we do now. And of course, the algorithm register is something afterwards, after the development has taken place. But I think it's working closely together with the industry is very important to get that development phase also in line with our frameworks, for instance. So that's very important. Yeah.
Okay. Final, very quick question from me. What is the one thing that you would change at the Dutch Ministry of Defence to develop and deploy AI more?
One thing? Okay, one thing. That's difficult. Well, I think we used to say train as you fight. And at this moment, it's quite difficult for us in the Netherlands to train as we fight in the virtual domain. Because what we are seeing is that due to privacy regulations, etc., it isn't possible, for instance, to use open source information in a situation not being a situation of war. Therefore, we always need a political decision approved by Parliament to do so, and we like to train as we fight. So we're really exploring the possibilities. So one of the things to get legislation where it's possible for us to train as we fight also in the cyber domain.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your openness and candor.
There was one question. I don't know.
I think we have run out of time.
We're running out of time. Yeah,
so
lunch is.
Maybe you can grab him on the way out. But thank you very much, Jeroen.
Great. Thank you.